both appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome, wherever you are, to the latest edition of Views on the News, the show where we have a panel, it's a small panel this week, of witty and wise people who are giving their opinions about the way the religious have impacted humanity over the past 7 days. I gave it out in the news yesterday, but I don't give an opinion then, because it's news and it should be unbiased. Tonight, we give our opinions. Okay, so we have joining us Guy from Manchester. Welcome, Guy.
Cheers.
You're always welcome. And David from New York.
Hello.
Welcome, David.
Hi.
You're also always welcome.
Thank you.
So we have the ongoing situation of Israel, the Palestinian versus Israeli war. It's got to be called a war. And there's been updates, which I haven't addressed in the Global Atheist News because it's swamping the mainstream news at the moment. But there's been revelations about Hamas atrocities. And then also Netanyahu has doubled down on his intention not to stop bombing. And of course, there are civilian casualties too. So I don't see an end to this. What do you think, guys?
Well, where do you start? I always think back to, I don't know if you know the American comedian. He used to host the Daily Show, Jon Stewart.
Yes, love him. Yes.
But he once said, and very brilliantly, that religion gives hope to a world torn apart by religion.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's probably the most insightful comment you can make about this recent violence and terrorism and war that is insufferable, based on not just territory, but based on faith,
Yes.
faith practices by different Bedouin groups who have occupied the same area for 5,000 years,
Yes.
and who each make equal claims to space that has been violently run by, the Romans, the Ottomans. You have the
Greeks, the Babylonians,
violence
the
of the Crusades, and you can go on and on and on until you get to shake the dice and you wind up at 1915 and then 1948 and now, of course, 2023 in its most modern guise. And the sadness that I feel for both the Israelis who have lost their lives and the innocent civilians in Palestine who have lost their lives simply because there are enough people on both sides who choose war and violence over peace and communication, who choose their idea that, a fatwa or, shouting Ali Akbar, or, driving tanks over homes is more valuable than, it's dehumanizing, it's evil. And in the land of where God's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
The three major religions who are all espousing peace in 2,000 years, if the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic religions have not found peace yet, I think it would be foolish to assume that anything that they can do in the future would ever lead to a just and honest peace.
Thank you for that.
That's very true. And what struck me, strikes me, is that the extremism of both sides kind of feeds on each other. So you've got the Hamas talking about, well, talking in terms of genocide and talking in terms of throwing the Israelis out. And whereas the Israelis or Zionist movement are saying something rather similar and getting on with it,
Right.
in terms of ethnic cleansing and removing Palestinians, and of course they are being now accused of genocide. I don't think they've yet reached genocide, because even though 17 or 18,000 dead in Gaza is a dreadful number, it doesn't approach anywhere near the genocidal, the numbers that would justify that criticism. But
Yes.
the extremism of both sides does feed on each other, and they're both talking in apocalyptic terms against each other.
Yes.
So this is really worrying. And we've got to break it. We've got to say no, stop, and let's find a settlement that addresses each side's reasonable needs and aspirations and freedoms and so forth. And I don't think the two-state solution is the answer, personally, but whatever solution is come to, it must settle everybody's reasonable rights and needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the fever has to get broken.
Yes.
And while there are claims of genocide and there are rules and strict definitions of what genocide means, even if it doesn't reach that level, you could make claims that both the Israeli military and Hamas, again, not the people of these regions, right? The Palestinian civilians and many of the Jews who live in Israel, but these warring parties who are working and trying to justify ethnocide, if not genocide.
Yes, indeed. What grieves me is the fact that they're both doing it in the name of slightly different gods. Okay, they're both Abrahamic, but they're slightly different gods that they individually think are the true ones, and there's no evidence for either. So I'm frustrated. I want to tell them, I want to put a bucket over their head and bang it with a spoon and say, there is no evidence for your God. You're all wasting your lives. Oh dear.
Yes, I don't think banging it with a spoon is going to be enough. But I mean, it reminds me of those people who went on demonstrations with placards with saying, "We don't approve of this sort of thing."
Yes. We're against protesting. Yes.
Right. But if the least violent is banging someone on the head with a spoon, I would accept that to the current situation.
The other thing that grieves me is it spreads now that we're a global village.
Right.
And so there's an incident that's just happened in central Paris when a German man was killed and two others injured. One is a British man in a knife and hammer attack near the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
That was a week ago. And they arrested a 26-year-old Frenchman, and they've started a prosecution on the basis of terrorism because he's a French national born to Iranian parents, but he made a pledge in a video on social media claiming that he'd converted to Islam and had made plans to travel to Syria to join IS. Now, that was when he was 18, and he was caught for that and imprisoned for 4 years. But he's out now, and he's bashing people with a knife and a hammer.
Yeah. It's so sad because you're seeing this in the States as well. You had that guy, I think, in Michigan, who stabbed to death a Palestinian child of 6 years old, because he was Palestinian, and his mother, and they had been renting a flat from this man for years, and there was no indication of anything, and he took it upon himself to murder a child. At the same time, you have both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic attacks on the rise in the United States, almost in equal proportion. So it's like, well, hate, if it was a stock, is going up right now, and one that I personally would never want to invest in. But it seems like a lot of people feel like they have to take almost a binary side in this for either their own, self-image, for their own modeling of what they think is right or wrong, and then it pulls into both the left and the right, and the sadness is that you see people who you thought were reasonable people come out with these views on either the Jews or the Palestinians, which is not humanistic, which is increasingly violent, which is the rhetoric is aggressive, not passive, and it's incredibly dangerous.
It is.
I think from my perspective as, of course, a non-believer, but also as a humanist, is what's disturbing is that we're dancing on the edge of this inhumanity to each other, which in the end, we're going to pluck out both our eyes, and there's no winner here.
No.
The only winner is, and I don't want to sound like a hippie, but some level of peace. If peace, depending on how you define peace, right? It could be cessation of war. It could be, a move towards understanding. So many different things can be defined as "quote unquote" peace. However we do it, it has to start with an understanding that we can't, as humans, keep killing each other for the sake of a religious identity. That's not going to get us anywhere. I'm sorry, I've talked too long.
Not at all. No.
No, that's correct. Yeah.
So you mentioned how it's spreading, and I want to play a little video. This I found. I was speechless. Well, let me play it first. Let me get your response to this.
That they are not taking that because they're doing it right. Leaving babies to rot. So happy when I saw the innocent Israeli hostages released. And then I saw the Palestinian child prisoners. Broke my heart because the UK News reported that they were under 18. They were children. Children possessed to life. They said, what? Yeah! Jail. No one. In the UK. Because our Palestinian lives are not valued. Little Marie with the bunches, she was killed and not on every single newspaper. So shit. We are proud people, and we are peaceful resistance, and everyone belongs with us. But we will not be silenced. To Mutar, to Bassam, to one, and all of those sharing the truth in Gaza, we stand here protecting all of you. And we hope that raising our voice will protect you. All the Palestinian people want is peace, safety, and security. A few weeks ago, my brother Mohammed called me, and I made a promise to him that children will live in a peaceful world. And that his children will follow their dreams. I promise that will happen. And every day I worry that will happen. long as I have air in my lungs, I will stand for justice across the world. I will use my voice loudly to stand for the justice in Palestine and to demand an immediate ceasefire. To every single one of you here, do not ever give up and do not stop using your voice.
I'm sorry about the sound, but it's what they
Mhm.
do now to try and prevent you grabbing their stuff is they wreck the sound when you try and copy it. But the subtitles gave you the gist of what she was saying. And she paid a tiny lip service to the Israeli cause when she said how pleased she was that the hostages were released. But most of her speech was incredibly biased on the Palestinian side. As you could see, her audience was entirely Palestinian. There were slogans supporting the Palestinian position. And do you know, this is what's outrageous. Do you know who she was?
No.
She's the wife of the Scottish First Minister, the
Hmm.
Prime Minister of Scotland.
Hmm.
I think she is she Palestinian herself, or she's got
Yes.
relatives in Gaza, hasn't she?
Yes, that's
Because
right.
there was quite a lot of publicity that he managed to get them out, or some of
Yes.
them out.
That's right. They have
And-
Palestinian ethnicity. But what grieves me is this is okay, she's not in government herself, but she's married to a very significant member of the Scottish devolved government, and she is coming out there with, to my mind, a very biased viewpoint, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that passions run very high
Right.
in any wartime situation. You can see it in Ukraine as well, and particularly in this sort of case, which is it's such a long-standing dispute, and of course, she is right in the sense that it is the Gazan people who are suffering at the moment, and it's not just that a large number have been killed, but the entire building and infrastructure of the place seem to be being demolished. I mean, all the pictures we see whole neighborhoods being destroyed. I mean, what sort of land will there be? What sort of place will they have after all of this is finished? I
Mhm.
suspect they'll be living in tents for
It'll be
years.
rubble. It will be rubble. The other thing you need to know is where she made that speech. It was
Where was
outside Holyrood House.
Oh, how Holyrood House, which is the palace of the king in Edinburgh, and it's
Yes.
opposite the Holyrood Parliament. So it's
Yes.
actually, they're both of them are there.
Yes.
Well, yeah. What's I find interesting is that for 2 years we had a pandemic, and then of course you had Russia invade Ukraine, and in the back of my mind, I remember thinking just a few months ago, before all this happens, like, whatever happened to the world's focus on this issue of Palestinian rights to, self-determination in land? It seems to have, like, really, for several years, was off the world stage as quote unquote news. And what I find really interesting is that I think, like, and I could be wrong, but I thought I remember reading this, that relations with Israel and several of its Arab neighbors had improved diplomatically, to the point where I believe Saudi Arabia was literally about to set up a diplomatic and economic official ties with a mission with Israel, which would have been significant.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that actually went through. So the other question I think we have to ask is, what are the other Arab states intending to do for the Palestinians as well? Not not just Iran, who's backing Hamas, and Hamas wants to kill all the Jews in Israel, but what are the other Arab states, many of who have diplomatic relations with Israel, doing to support the Palestinian cause as well? You don't hear much about that.
Well, we do.
Diplomatically,
because Dubai are currently hosting COP28.
right?
They have been asked those questions, and they don't want to go there. They don't want to come out on any side at all.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Egypt, right, right below, right on a border with Gaza as well, and so my question is, and you know, you're talking about a group of 2 million people who are stateless, who demand and should have a state. So
Yes.
I think, I mean, Guy, I know you're thinking a two-state solution wouldn't be the answer, perhaps, and I'd love to know like why specifically, but I think we've really got to get back to like the meta questions about, you know, why do the Palestinians not have a state right now, and what can we do, whether it's, and I'm not talking about a blame game, you know, it's the Israelis who are not doing it, it's not the United States or the West who's stopping it, the Arabs who are not pushing for it. Like, why can we not concretely carve out, just like they did for Israel, carve out land and provide it to these people who want to be to have autonomy? I mean, I mean, we've already done enough. We've, you know, if you take off all the borders, the lines are all human made. Every border that there is on the planet is not real. It's subjective to what we have decided to do to the planet.
Except for island nations.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about Gaza is that it was in effect a separate political entity. It didn't have an independent status in sort of international sphere, but it was an independent state, and it was run by the Gazan people, or
the Palestinian Authority, correct?
No, but the Palestinian Authority. Well, I understand that didn't actually reach into Gaza, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But the point is that you know, it wasn't occupied or supervised by Israel in a way that they apparently occupy or supervise the West Bank. So that's your answer to a certain extent. You know, unless the Palestinian cause is understood and their rights and needs fully respected, which I don't think can happen if they're just given a bit of land here and there, which is what might happen. You know, I think they need to have access to the entire country alongside Jews, fully respected. I know maybe this is idealistic, but I mean, I can't see how anything less than that would actually work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the answer, but I think all of us as viewers of this are seeing the needless suffering that each side is doing to each other's civilians, and realize that this is not the world that we should be inventing for ourselves and for our children, because you know, 50 years from now,
I can't help thinking
I don't want my grandchildren or my children to have to be dealing with the mess that we didn't fix. In 2023.
This is a segue from that point. Exactly that. I just can't help thinking that the international community really needs to take this seriously and get it sorted out. They've been tinkering around the edges for a long time, and you know, the United States and Britain have been supporting one side when actually we shouldn't be doing that. We should be saying to them, I'm sorry, you're not getting any more money or support or arms. You've got to sort this. You know, somehow something like that is going to be needed. I think.
I don't know whether those times exist any longer. The idea of a world power stamping on a local dispute, I think it's
you're probably right. But I mean, if you think about Northern Ireland, they did have a ceasefire.
Yeah.
And out of that ceasefire, they had negotiations. It took a few years to get to the
Right.
point where they had a peace settlement after the ceasefire. I can't see that actually any settlement could ever come other than that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned the West Bank. So I'm afraid I've got to tell you that everything is not sweetness and light there either, because there's another battle playing out in Jerusalem, because there's a small Armenian Christian community there, and their own patriarch and an Australian Israeli businessman is keen to be taking over the Armenian quarter of the old city. This is quite an involved story, but there's Danny Rothman, this Australian Israeli businessman, has made a secret deal in 2021 with the Armenian Christian Patriarchate to lease a swathe of the Armenian quarter, including part of the Armenian Theological Seminary and several family homes and a car park, on which he proposes to build his latest hotel. Now,
Oh my God.
the Armenian Christian community are up in arms again about this, because it was kept secret, but it's now become public, and they have seen a priest unfrocked for collaborating with this maneuver, and the leadership of their denomination being questioned. That's Patriarch Nurhan Manouchian. And so a Jerusalem-born Armenian has said, this is land that belongs to the Armenian community. It doesn't belong to the Patriarchate or the Patriarch. He can't do with it what he wants. So there's this little minor little contest going on. And of course, the Armenians have had a presence in Jerusalem since the 4th century,
Mm-hmm.
when Armenia became the first sovereign state to convert to Christianity. I think it's following the adoption of Christianity by the Roman Empire.
Roman, yeah.
Yeah. And so they've been there a long time, although some of them arrived more recently when fleeing the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this dispute going on now between the Armenian Christian cohort and the rest of the Christian quarter of Jerusalem, where Palestinian Christians speak Arabic and worship in Greek Orthodox or Catholic churches. So that's a predominantly inter-Nassim Christian.
Sounds like a mess to me.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes,
there are groups of ancient Christians in
Right.
Jerusalem.
Yes.
And apparently they fight over access to the holy places and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty unseemly, but yeah. I mean, I don't feel the need to make any comment on that. Thank you for telling me about it. You know,
it's been going on for a few years. It's not going to be solvable by us tonight, I'm afraid.
no.
Yeah. Well, you know, do you ever see the movie Religulous by Bill Maher?
No.
Do you know, I've heard of it. I'm not sure whether I've
You
seen it.
should definitely watch it.
Yeah.
You could get it on streaming services. It's a wonderful film which calls into question a lot about modern faith practices and focuses on Israel and how people who really are religious are looking forward to Armageddon, which is supposed to start in Israel, which is one of the reasons why so many evangelicals support Israel. And as a death cult, which the Abrahamic religions all are, you know, there are groups of humans who don't see the potential violence as bad. They see it as fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, yes. Oh my God.
No,
And when you
scary.
think about that, as well as the human struggle for autonomy and peace on both sides of this conflict, you realize that not everybody is playing with the same intentionality.
No. So going to the other side, we've just examined some sort of squabbles between different denominations of Christianity. But on the other side, look at this preacher. This is unbelievable. Just take a look at this.
Guys, protesting in and of itself, is it haram? The strongest view, I haven't seen any evidence to say that it is. But are there things that happen at protests that could be haram, that are absolutely impossible to escape? For example, free mixing with women, at the very least. Men and women mixing with each other. Is that not something that is necessary at the protest? Yes or no? Let's not talk about other things. Let's not talk about the salah time that gets missed. Let's not talk about what? Standing next to what? A guy that's going to take it in the backside at night. Because that's who you're protesting with. That's who you're protesting with. Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that. At the very least, is it not that men and women are coming and free mixing together? You're going to stand, your sisters are coming out of their houses. Well, what if people to go and stay in your house? And if you come out, sister, make sure it's in the top one, at the very least, a jilbab. At the very least, a jilbab. But she's coming out with makeup, nothing. Because it's not deen of Allah, but it's humanitarian cause. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So then, is Allah going to give victory to people that are disobeying Him outright? Like, if Allah is above the heavens and the earth, but above His throne, He's looking down at these people who are protesting, not even asking Allah for help, asking kuffar to intervene. And they're with what? They're free mixing. I remember I said this in a video once, and people really got angry with me. One guy wanted to physically attack me because he was like, people are being killed and you're saying you're worried about free mixing. I'm like, brother, wallahi, you're a shaitan. Wallahi, you're a shaitan, man. Because victory only comes from Allah. If you leave the free mixing, the victory will come. That's the point. That's the point. Leave the sins, brother. If you leave the sin, Allah will give you victory. You will be given victory.
He seems to be against protesting. He thinks it's haram because men and women might freely mix in a protest. And even worse than that, although he doesn't really want to talk about it, but he does talk about it, some of them might be gay. So what he's doing there is he's revealing to the audience his obsession with sexuality, especially with homosexuality. It's just weird.
It is weird. I found it hard to follow his speech, to be honest, but I think I got the gist of it along those lines. It is a bit weird, and you know, he sounds like a Salafist. I would have thought he's what I would call on the extreme wing of Islam. But yeah, I mean, the trouble is, it's easy to laugh at these people because it's so ridiculous, but they exercise a lot of influence.
Yes,
and you know, I come across Muslim women because I do. I do interfaith dialogue, and I'm involved in something called the Muslim Jewish Forum in Manchester. And there are Muslim women there who won't shake my hand because I'm a man.
Yes,
I mean, but they do sort of mix with men, but so they're liberal, but they still won't shake my hand. So that there's this sort of thinking goes far and wide, even into liberal Muslim circles.
Did these people not have mothers?
Yeah, but mothers, you see, are within the family relationship, and there's an exception there. And of course, that brings us to that amazing situation where if you have if you've been a wet nurse for a baby, so you've given breast to this child, then that child counts as your child, and therefore you can associate with them. And so you get to the situation that apparently in Saudi Arabia, some women in offices breastfeed their male colleagues so that it's not haram to associate with them in the office.
God.
I mean, that is just completely bizarre.
Thank God I'm an atheist.
Well, you
Don't
sure
have
it's
to worry about any of this shit, you know?
you sure it's not shaitan, because he was going on about shaitan. Yeah.
I'm just so happy to leave all that baggage behind.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, it's
Yeah.
funny you should say that, because I'm working on a talk now just on that point about, you know, freeing yourself of religion and the benefits thereof.
Bravo. Excellent.
Excellent. Yeah. We want to hear it. Yeah.
Yes.
So going to a couple of lighter items, because I could go into an item about Mormon sex abuse, in which a father is accused of abusing his daughter, but I think we've had enough filth.
Yeah.
So I'm going to skip to Puerto Rican superstar. I'll just can you call me later? I'm in a meeting. I just don't deal with that. I know that you love Puerto Rican superstar Daddy Yankee, who is famous for UK chart hits like Despacito. I know Despacito. Who doesn't like Despacito? We sing it in the car.
I've
And
never heard of it.
Hey,
And
sounds like a
Gasolina.
generation gap to me. I don't know.
You ought to have children. You see, that's the thing. So anyway, you'll be amazed to hear that he's giving up music to devote his life to Jesus.
Yeah.
He's a sort of rapper.
A bit like Cat Stevens did.
Yes,
Right.
This
For
was
Islam.
for
Yeah.
Islam. Yeah.
yeah, modern day Cat Stevens. He says, living a successful life is not the same as living a life with purpose. For a long time, I tried to feel the emptiness that nobody could fill. That's why tonight I recognize and am unashamed to tell the world that Jesus lives in me and that I will live for him.
Oh God. Hmm.
Okay.
And yes, indeed. Finally,
That means his music is going to start to really suck real soon, though, by the way.
yeah, could be. Yeah. I think Jesus living in him, it sounds sort of parasitic, doesn't it? Anyway, you'll be pleased to hear that the Ministry of Defence
In the
has
UK.
announced, yes, it's announced that it will recruit non-religious pastoral support officers.
No.
Otherwise known as chaplains, which is what I did.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, indeed, yes.
Oh.
Well, they're called non-religious pastoral officers, but they're the same, employed on the same terms as chaplains. There's one for the Army, one for the Navy, and one for the Royal Air Force. And we like that, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not enough. I'm one for that's ridiculous. You know how
Well,
many Anglican and Catholic and Muslim ones? There's probably a few hundred. So we need at least the same number as of these others, because the reality is that if the population is 50% non-religion, then the armed forces are probably 50% religion.
Here, here.
Non-religious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's a start, though, and it's in the right direction.
Mhm.
It certainly is in the right direction, and I know the defense humanists have been working at it for many years. I mean, at least 5 years they've been pressing this, and I think that there's to a certain extent they've had a lot of sympathy and support from the higher reaches of the army and so forth, but almost certainly they've had pushback from the chaplains, from the Christian chaplains. And this is happening in prisons. Again, the prisons have chaplaincy services, and I know that some humanist chaplains are finding it quite difficult to work there in the sort of face of the pressures of religious chaplains.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't find it at all difficult where I work. Incidentally,
Good.
I'm a volunteer in a psychiatric unit. I find that very easy. I'm fully accepted. So and a lot of the staff are humanists. You know, it's
Good.
really encouraging. Yeah.
Good. So keep up the good work, Guy. Yeah.
Bravo.
And you, David, thank you very much for your
Yeah.
contributions.
Are you kidding? I look forward to these Sundays. I'm sorry I missed the last couple, on and off, but I love being here with you guys. So
Great. You don't
Great
have to
stuff.
apologize. We'll all turn up when we can.
thank you.
Family
Cheers.
comes.
Nice to see you anyway.
Yeah.
Say bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye then. Cheers.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that?